It was a little after midnight when the streets grew quiet, the kind of quiet where every sound feels louder than usual. Street lights painted long shadows on the empty sidewalks, and the air carried the smell of damp concrete from a light rain earlier in the evening. A young woman named Maya drove slowly down the avenue, her mind heavy with thoughts of work, bills, and the everyday struggle she carried. She was tired, but there was also a sense of relief in her heart. Her shift was over, and she was on her way home. She only wanted peace, her small apartment, and the comfort of sleep. As she turned onto a less crowded street, the sudden flash of red and blue lights filled her rearview mirror. The sound of a siren followed, sharp and demanding, shattering her calm moment. Maya's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Her heartbeat quickened and her chest felt tight. She pulled her car to the side, trying to breathe slowly, hoping it was nothing serious. She had done nothing wrong, but still fear rose in her stomach like a heavy stone. 2 police officers stepped out of the patrol car, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Maya lowered her window slightly, her hands visible on the steering wheel, exactly as she had learned was safest to do. The cold night air slipped into the car, and with it came a wave of unease. One officer walked up to her window, his steps firm, while the others stayed back, shining the flashlight across the car's seats. Maya spoke softly, her voice calm, though inside she felt a storm. "Good evening, officer. Is there a problem?" The officer leaned slightly, his tone firm and questioning. He asked why she was driving in this area so late, where she was going, and what she had been doing. The questions felt less like a routine check and more like an interrogation. Maya explained she had just finished a long shift at work and was on her way home. She hoped her tired voice and uniform shirt would be enough to show she was simply a worker, heading back after a hard day. But the conversation didn't ease. The questions kept coming, sharper now. Maya noticed a couple walking on the opposite side of the street. They slowed their steps, glancing toward her car, sensing that something was not right. Another person standing near a bus stop quietly lifted a phone as though recording almost instinctively, the way people do when they sense a moment that might need evidence. Maya's palms began to sweat. She kept her eyes forward, remembering her grandmother's words. "Stay calm. Speak with respect. Keep your hands where they can see them." She followed every piece of that advice, but still, her heart pounded louder with each passing second. The officer's voice grew heavier, almost accusing, though Maya could not understand why. She tried again, explaining her long day, her job, even the name of the store where she worked. Yet it seemed nothing she said changed the tone. The other officer now circled the car slowly, shining the flashlight into the back seat, into her bag, into every corner, as though searching for something that did not exist. By now, the couple across the street had stopped walking. The person at the bus stop had moved closer, phone in hand, recording more openly. The atmosphere was charged like the air before a storm. Maya's throat felt dry. She thought of her younger brother, who would be waiting at home expecting her to arrive soon. She thought of her mother, who always told her to text when she got in safely. She wanted nothing more than to finish this moment and return to them. One of the officers asked her to step out of the car. The request made her chest tighten even more. She obeyed, carefully opening the door, her movements slow so nothing could be misunderstood. The pavement was cold beneath her shoes, and the night air wrapped around her like a heavy cloak. She stood quietly, the lights flashing behind her, making the scene look more dramatic than it was. The small group of bystanders grew. A young man riding a bike stopped to watch. A woman walking her dog stood still, her phone also in hand now. Their faces carried concern, and though Maya did not know them, she felt a strange sense of silent support. The officer continued speaking, his words clipped, his tone rising at times. Maya answered politely, though she felt frustration building inside. She knew she was innocent, yet she was standing there as though she had done something wrong. Every second felt like an hour. Then something shifted. The bystanders, seeing the growing tension, began to speak up. A man's voice called out from across the street. "She hasn't done anything." Another voice added, "We're recording everything." The officers glanced at the crowd, and for a brief moment their tone changed, becoming more cautious under the weight of watching eyes and recording cameras. Maya felt a mix of relief and fear. Relief that people were watching, fear that anything could still happen in the next moment. She tried to stand tall, though her legs trembled slightly. She reminded herself that she was not alone anymore. The recording lights of the phones captured the flashing patrol car, the tense body language, and Maya's tired but steady face. She knew this night would not be forgotten. Whether she liked it or not, her story was no longer just her own. It belonged to everyone who stood there, everyone who would see the video, and everyone who would share their voice afterward. As the officers finally stepped back, telling her she could leave, Maya felt her shoulders sink with exhaustion. She climbed back into her car, her hands shaking on the wheel. She drove off slowly, aware of every eye that had followed her, aware of every recording that had just been made. She did not yet know how far those recordings would travel, or how many lives they would touch. All she knew in that moment was that she had survived the night. But the night was not over. For Maya, and for everyone who had witnessed the scene, the story had only just begun. The next morning came with the sound of buzzing phones and endless notifications. Maya woke up after only a few hours of sleep, her body still tired but her mind restless. She reached for her phone and was shocked to see dozens of messages, missed calls and alerts from people she hadn't spoken to in months. Her cousin had sent a text with a short video clip attached asking, "Is this you?" With a deep breath, Maya pressed play. On her screen, she saw herself from the night before, standing under the flashing red and blue lights, her face pale but steady. She could hear her own voice, soft but firm, answering questions. She saw the crowd gathering and she heard the shouts of strangers defending her. The video ended with her quietly walking back to her car. It was surreal to watch herself from the outside, like seeing someone else live through the fear she had felt so strongly. By the time she finished the video, her phone was already vibrating again. Friends were calling, worried, angry, and supportive all at once. Some cried on the phone. Others promised they would stand by her. Her brother knocked on her door, holding his own phone in his hand, eyes wide. "Maya," he said, "this is everywhere. It's on social media. People are sharing it nonstop." Maya sat on the edge of her bed trying to take it all in. A single moment, one night on a quiet street, had now become a public story. She hadn't asked for this, hadn't wanted it, but the truth was out there. She thought of the bystanders who had lifted their phones, of their courage to capture the moment. Without them, no one would have believed how it had happened. The video was spreading quickly. By noon, local news channels were already reporting on it. Commentators discussed the way she had been questioned and the role of the bystanders. They replayed the video over and over, each time pointing out her calm answers, the officer's harsh tone, and the voices of strangers defending her. The story grew bigger with each passing hour. At work, her manager called to say she could take the day off, even the whole week if she needed. The store had received calls too, some supportive, some angry, all because her face was now on television screens and phone screens across the city. Her coworkers sent her messages filled with encouragement, telling her she was brave, that they were proud of her. But not all messages were kind. As she scrolled through comments online, Maya saw both love and hate. Many people praised her for staying calm, for being strong. Others questioned her, doubted her, or twisted the story in cruel ways. She quickly learned that once a story becomes public, it belongs not only to supporters, but also to critics. The mix of emotions overwhelmed her. In the afternoon, a group of community leaders arrived at her apartment. They had seen the video and wanted to help. They spoke gently, offering legal advice, emotional support, and guidance. One of them, a woman who had been active in the community for decades, told Maya, "You don't have to carry this alone. You have a voice and we'll make sure it's heard." Outside her building, people were beginning to gather. Some carried signs demanding justice. Others simply stood together in quiet solidarity. Reporters showed up too, their cameras ready, their microphones pointed toward anyone willing to speak. Maya peeked through the window, her heart pounding. She had never been the center of attention, and now she was at the center of a storm she hadn't chosen. By evening, the protests grew louder. Cars honked as they passed. People chanted slogans, and the video continued to spread across the nation. Celebrities began reposting it, public figures commented on it, and hashtags with her name started trending. What had happened to her was no longer just her story. It had become a symbol of something larger, something many others had faced in silence. Maya sat in her living room with her family, watching the news play the clip again. This time she noticed something she hadn't before, the determination in her own face even as fear gripped her inside. Her mother held her hand and whispered, "You were strong. You showed the world what dignity looks like." As night returned, the weight of the day pressed on her shoulders. She tried to rest, but the noise of chanting outside and the endless ringing of her phone made it impossible. She turned off the lights, hoping for quiet, but instead she heard her phone buzzing again. Another call, then another. She picked it up, thinking it was a friend or another reporter. But what she heard surprised her. The voice on the other end introduced himself as a soldier, serving in the U.S. Army. He had seen the video and it had moved him deeply. He told her he admired her calm strength and wanted her to know that people in uniform, people who had taken oaths to protect freedom, stood behind her. Maya listened in silence, overwhelmed by his sincerity. She thanked him softly, not sure what else to say. Minutes later, another call came. This time it was from a woman who served overseas. She too had seen the video, and she wanted to share her support. She spoke of her own experiences, the challenges she had faced, and the way Maya's story touched her heart. Before long, the calls multiplied. Soldiers, veterans, and ordinary citizens reached out. The clock ticked past midnight, but the phone kept ringing. With each call, Maya realized her story was no longer just a video online. It had become a rallying cry for people who believed in fairness, in dignity, and in standing against injustice. She sat on her couch, the phone pressed to her ear, tears slipping down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from the strange mix of exhaustion, relief, and hope. She felt her world shift. What had begun as a frightening night on a lonely street had now become the spark of something much larger. And though the fear was still there, though the memories of that night still shook her, Maya sensed something powerful growing. She was not alone anymore. She was part of a chorus of voices, stronger together than any single one could ever be. The night felt endless for Maya. Every time she thought the phone would stop ringing, it lit up again. The calls were no longer just from friends or reporters. They were coming from unexpected places, people she had never met but who somehow felt connected to her. At first, she was surprised when the soldier called, but as more calls came, she realized something unusual was happening. The story had reached far beyond her city, beyond her community, and was touching people across the country. It was close to 1 a.m. when Maya sat curled on the couch, a blanket around her shoulders, the phone warm in her hand from constant use. Her brother had dozed off in the chair beside her, his head leaning awkwardly, his phone still open to the trending page. Outside, she could hear the fading chants of protesters who had stood for hours refusing to leave. Their voices were softer now, but the message was still alive in the night air. The screen lit up again with another unknown number. Maya hesitated, her heart beating faster before answering. The voice on the line was steady, deep, and respectful. "Ma'am, my name is David. I'm a captain in the U.S. Army. I just want to say that I saw what happened and I want you to know you're not standing alone. There are many of us who see your strength." His words were calm, almost formal, but behind them was a tone of humanity, of someone who had seen hardship and wanted to reassure her. Maya pressed the phone closer to her ear. She didn't know what to say at first. She wasn't used to people in uniform calling her at night, much less to offer encouragement. Finally, she whispered, "Thank you. I didn't think anyone outside my city would care this much." The captain gave a soft laugh, one that sounded weary but kind. "People care, Maya. Sometimes it takes one moment, one voice to remind us what we're fighting for." "You reminded us." When the call ended, she sat in silence, letting the words sink in. Her fear from that night was still there, but now it felt as though layers of support were wrapping around her. Voices she couldn't see but could feel. Only minutes later, another call came. This time it was a woman's voice, strong but emotional. She introduced herself as an Army medic serving overseas. "I can't be there in person," she said, "but I need you to know that I watched your video more than once. The way you stayed calm, it gave me courage. Out here we face things too, things that test us. But you showed grace under pressure, and that matters." Maya's eyes filled with tears as she listened. She had not tried to be brave. She had only wanted to survive. And yet people were calling her brave, telling her she had inspired them. She wondered how a single night could change so much. The calls kept coming. Some were short, just a few words of support before the caller hung up. Others lasted longer, with strangers telling her their stories. A veteran spoke about returning home and feeling unseen until he saw her video. A young soldier explained that he had faced discrimination in his own town and understood her pain. They didn't just offer comfort, they connected their own lives to hers. making her realize she was now part of something much bigger. By the second hour of non-stop calls, Maya leaned back against the couch cushions, exhausted but strangely awake inside. She thought of the word, midnight. For most, it was a time of sleep and rest, but for her it had become a time of awakening, of connection. Midnight was no longer quiet. Midnight was filled with voices. Her mother, who had been quiet most of the evening, finally sat beside her and held her hand. "Do you see, Maya? Do you see what your strength has done?" she asked softly. Maya nodded but struggled to find words. She didn't feel like a leader or a fighter. She was just a woman who wanted to go home safely that night. But sometimes the simplest acts, standing tall, speaking calmly, can become a light for others. In the background, the television replayed the same clip again. Commentators debated what it meant for the community, what it meant for the country. A journalist on the screen mentioned the unusual response from members of the military. "It's rare," the anchor said, "to see so many voices from service members reaching out directly after an incident like this." Hearing that made Maya realize the truth. Her phone wasn't just buzzing because of sympathy, but because people in positions of respect and authority had chosen to speak. The phone rang again. This time, the caller identified himself as a retired general. His voice was slow, deliberate. He told Maya that he had served for decades, seen countless struggles, but her quiet dignity struck him. "You reminded me why service matters," he said. "It's about protecting the rights of every citizen. And what you went through reminded us we still have work to do." Maya held the phone to her ear, stunned by the weight of his words. She thought of how small she had felt standing under the flashing lights. But now, hearing this man's voice, she felt bigger somehow, not because she had sought power, but because truth had given her a platform. Her brother stirred awake, blinking as he heard another voice through the speaker. He rubbed his eyes and whispered, "Are you serious?" "That's a general?" Maya gave a small nod, almost laughing through her tears. The night felt unreal, like a dream she would wake from, but the phone in her hand proved it was real. As the hours passed, Maya realized the calls were not only about her. They were about everyone who had ever felt voiceless. People shared stories of being judged, of being silenced, of moments when they wished someone had recorded what they went through. They told her she had given them courage to speak, to step forward, to believe change was possible. At one point, Maya set the phone down, staring at it as it buzzed again. She whispered, almost to herself, "Why me?" Her mother squeezed her hand and answered, "Because sometimes the right story finds the right person, and the world needs someone who can carry it." The clock showed it was nearly 3 in the morning, but sleep was far away. Maya felt tired in her body, but alive in her spirit. The fear of that night hadn't left her, but it was no longer just fear. It had transformed into something else, a sense of purpose she had never expected. When she finally lay down, the phone still close by, Maya closed her eyes with one last thought. She had been a stranger on a dark street, but now she was connected to thousands. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing for sure. Her life had changed forever. The next morning, Maya woke up to a new world. The sun shone through her curtains, but outside her window, the sound of chants and car horns filled the air. Overnight, the story had grown into something larger than she ever imagined. News vans lined the street, cameras pointed at her building, and people carried signs with words like justice, fairness, and her name in bold letters. The quiet woman who had only wanted to go home after a long shift was now at the center of a movement. Her phone continued to buzz with calls and messages. Some were from reporters asking for interviews, others from strangers sending prayers and encouragement. She felt overwhelmed but also strangely grounded. It was as if the storm around her had given her a kind of clarity. She knew she had a choice: to remain silent and hope the story faded, or to step forward and allow her voice to be heard. Her brother urged her to speak. "Maya," he said, "people believe in you. They're looking at you now. If you don't tell your story, someone else will try to tell it for you." Her mother agreed, holding her daughter's hand with quiet strength. "Sometimes life puts us in a place we never asked for," she said. "But that place is where we're meant to stand." Later that day, Maya stood at her window and saw the crowd outside. They weren't angry faces. They were hopeful ones. People waved when they noticed her, and some even cheered. A young girl held up a sign that read, "Be brave like Maya." That simple message brought tears to her eyes. She realized then that her story was no longer just about her. It had become a mirror for countless others who had faced injustice and silence. In the afternoon, she was invited to speak at a gathering in the town square. At first, her stomach twisted with nerves. She wasn't a politician or a leader. She was just someone who worked hard every day to make ends meet. But when she arrived, the sight of hundreds of people standing together gave her strength. Families with children, elderly couples, veterans, students, workers, all had come to stand for fairness. When she stepped up to the microphone, the crowd fell quiet. She looked out at the sea of faces and felt the weight of their expectations. Her voice trembled at first, but then it grew steady. "I didn't ask to be here," she began, "but last night showed me something. It showed me how quickly fear can grow, but also how powerful it is when people stand together." The crowd erupted in applause. For the first time since that night, Maya felt her fear give way to courage. Over the next days, the movement grew. Protests spread to other cities. People carried signs not only with Maya's name, but also with messages demanding changes to how citizens were treated. Veterans showed up wearing their old uniforms, standing shoulder to shoulder with ordinary citizens. One veteran held a sign that read, "We fought for freedom abroad. Now we fight for it here." His words were shared across the internet, becoming another spark that fueled the fire. Maya was invited to appear on national television. She hesitated, nervous about being misunderstood, but she agreed. Sitting under the bright studio lights, she told her story again, carefully and calmly. She didn't shout or accuse. Instead, she spoke about dignity, respect, and the need for fairness. Her honesty touched millions of viewers. Messages of support flooded in from across the country and even from overseas. What surprised Maya most was the growing support from members of the military. Soldiers, both active and retired, wrote open letters, posted videos, and spoke at gatherings. They reminded the public that their oath was to protect all citizens equally. One letter, signed by dozens of veterans, read, "We see in Maya the courage we hope to live by." When Maya read those words, she felt humbled. She had never thought of herself as courageous, but the world now saw her that way. The police department, feeling the pressure, announced an internal review. For the first time, officials admitted that the situation could have been handled differently. It was only a small step, but for the community it was proof that their voices were being heard. Crowds cheered when the announcement was made, but Maya reminded them gently, "Change doesn't come in one night. We must keep standing together." Meanwhile, the midnight calls continued. Soldiers stationed far from home still reached out, leaving messages of encouragement. One night, Maya received a call from a young soldier who said, "I'm calling from overseas. I just want you to know, when I saw your story, I felt like I was looking at my own sister. Stay strong because you're giving strength to all of us." Maya cried softly after that call, touched by the simple kindness of a stranger. Everywhere she went, people recognized her. Some approached her shyly, thanking her for speaking up. Others hugged her with tears in their eyes. She accepted their words with humility, though inside she often felt the same ordinary woman she had always been. Still, she realized that sometimes it is the ordinary people who carry extraordinary stories. One evening, Maya attended a candlelight vigil held in her honor. Hundreds gathered, each holding a small flame. As the crowd stood in silence, the sight of so many tiny lights glowing in the dark moved her deeply. She whispered to her mother, "It's like the night is no longer against me, it's with me." Her mother smiled and said, "That's because you turned darkness into light." The movement began to inspire others to share their stories. People came forward with their own experiences, no longer afraid to speak. Maya listened to them, offering comfort, knowing how much it meant to be heard. Slowly, she realized that her role was no longer just about her own incident. It was about helping others find their voices too. As the days passed, Maya's life remained far from normal, but she embraced the change. The noise, the cameras, the endless calls, all of it carried a purpose now. She saw hope in the faces of strangers, strength in the voices of soldiers, and determination in the hearts of her community. And though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. A quiet night on a lonely street had awakened something powerful. What began as fear had grown into a movement, and Maya was now the heart of it. She understood that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. And with every step, she carried not just her own story, but the voices of countless others who believed in a future of dignity and justice. The days following the vigil passed in a blur for Maya. Each morning she woke to messages, calls, and news updates. The video that had started it all was now shared across multiple platforms, reaching people she had never imagined. What had once been a frightening, lonely night on a quiet street had become a movement with its own momentum, and she was at the center. Despite the attention, Maya tried to keep some normalcy. She returned to work for short periods, though colleagues treated her differently now. They no longer saw just the quiet worker. They saw someone whose courage had inspired thousands. Customers recognized her too, offering smiles, nods, and words of support. Maya realized that life had changed in ways she could not have predicted, and it would never truly be the same. The local authorities, feeling the pressure of public opinion, announced a formal investigation. The officers involved were temporarily reassigned, and the department promised to review their procedures. Maya attended the first hearing, accompanied by her family and several community leaders. She gave her statement calmly, her voice steady, though her heart raced. She spoke honestly, recounting every detail she remembered. The crowd outside waited quietly, showing their support with small gestures, holding signs, nodding and sometimes clapping softly as she finished. Her story, amplified by the calls and messages from soldiers, veterans, and civilians, had created a ripple effect. Other towns began holding gatherings, where ordinary citizens came forward to share experiences of fear, injustice, or discrimination. People who had once felt invisible now felt empowered to speak. Maya understood that her own experience had become a catalyst for something far greater than herself. One evening, as she returned home from a community meeting, her phone rang again. This time it was a call from a high-ranking officer in the U.S. Army. He spoke with care and respect, explaining that the military had been watching the story unfold and wanted to acknowledge her strength. "You've reminded us all why we serve," he said. "It's not only to protect the country but to protect every individual in it. What you experienced shows that courage can change hearts, and we want you to know you are not alone." Maya listened quietly, her eyes glistening with tears. She had never imagined that a single night could lead to such recognition and support. It was humbling but also inspiring. The voices on the other end of the line were not just offering comfort. They were validating her experience, reminding her that one person's courage can inspire countless others. The movement continued to grow. Local leaders organized workshops on understanding community relations, respectful law enforcement, and how citizens could protect their rights. Veterans shared stories from their own lives, connecting with civilians in ways that had not been common before. Each day brought new stories of change, small victories, and hopeful moments. Maya attended as many gatherings as she could, sometimes speaking, sometimes simply listening, always absorbing the sense of unity and purpose that had grown from her own experience. Through it all, Maya never lost sight of her own life. She returned home each night to her family, finding comfort in familiar routines. Her mother prepared simple meals. Her brother checked her phone for messages, and together they shared small moments of laughter and relief. Even amid the chaos of public attention, these moments reminded Maya of who she was and why she had to stay grounded. Months passed, and the investigation concluded. The officers involved received training, and policies were updated to ensure fairer interactions with the public. Maya was invited to meet with local government officials and police representatives to discuss her experience and provide suggestions on how to improve community relations. She spoke with honesty and grace, emphasizing that the goal was not punishment but understanding, fairness, and prevention. Her words resonated with everyone present, and she realized that her role had transformed from victim to advocate, from observer to active participant in creating change. Outside, the public response remained strong. People continued to speak her name, sharing stories of solidarity and courage. The soldiers who had called her at midnight months ago remained in touch, some sending letters, others posting messages of encouragement online. Their support had begun as simple acknowledgement but had grown into a network of allies who believed in justice, fairness, and respect for all citizens. Maya felt a deep sense of gratitude for each voice that had joined hers, turning her personal story into something bigger than anyone could have imagined. As she reflected one evening, sitting quietly on her porch, Maya realized how much she had changed. The fear she had felt on that quiet street months ago had not disappeared, but it had transformed. Fear had become awareness, Uncertainty had become strength and loneliness had become connection. She had discovered resilience she didn't know she had, and in doing so had shown others how courage could inspire action. The night grew dark, but Maya did not feel afraid. She thought of the soldiers who had called, the community members who had stood with her, and the thousands of voices that had amplified her story. Each one was a reminder that no one is truly alone, that unity and compassion could overcome fear and injustice. She understood that her life had changed in ways she could not have predicted, but the change had brought purpose and meaning. Her story continued to inspire. Schools invited her to speak about courage and civic responsibility. Community groups asked her to help organize workshops on communication and respect between authorities and citizens. Even ordinary conversations at work carried more depth, as people shared their experiences and listened to hers. Maya realized that one night on a lonely street had grown into a lifetime of impact. At the heart of it, she understood a simple truth. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to stand tall despite it. She had been scared, vulnerable, and uncertain, but by staying calm and speaking honestly, she had sparked something extraordinary. The world had responded with voices she could never have imagined, reminding her and everyone around her that one person's strength could ignite hope in thousands of hearts. Finally, one quiet night, Maya sat in her living room, the city lights twinkling outside her window. She looked at her phone, now mostly silent after months of calls and messages, and felt a sense of peace. She thought of the long journey from that frightening night to this moment. The fear, the uncertainty, the exhaustion, it had all led to something meaningful. Her story had changed not just her life, but the lives of countless others. She smiled softly, knowing that the impact of one night, one voice, one act of courage, could never truly be measured. Maya had started as an ordinary person facing an extraordinary situation. She had ended as someone who had inspired unity, hope, and change. The quiet woman on a lonely street had become a symbol of courage, showing the world that even in fear, strength and dignity could shine through. And as she closed her eyes to finally rest, she carried with her the knowledge that her story would continue to live in the hearts of those who needed it most. The night that had once frightened her had transformed into a legacy of courage, reminding everyone that even in the darkest moments, hope could rise, and one person could make a difference.